The number of out-of-school children in Nigeria today has hit 10.7 million, raising the percentage of illiteracy in the country. Mr. Obi calls for massive investment in the education sector.
We have today 12 million people in our basic education, which is the critical one. We're not talking about tertiary education. The critical component everybody is investing is the basic education. We have 12 million when there should have been 20-something million. And how do we get that? We can resolve to invest in that we are going to, by next 1 year or two, bring in 20 million back to school. I can show you, I did it before. You can bring them back. We will decide to budget properly. What are we going to do? We send these monies direct to school at per head, not via state, not via local government, not via anybody. Direct to the school. We have enough money we are spending in education today, but it's not going to the right place because when the money leaves, the transit points and checkpoints that before it gets there, you will never get there.
I want to first thank Pastor.
It's the turn of the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, to speak.
On a very important and symbolic day.
She takes the audience through the journey that led to the economic downfall of the country, claiming that only 10% of government spending in the last administration was expended on capital projects. Hence, the infrastructure deficit in the country and a major challenge for business to thrive.
Only 10% of what we were spending was productive. Effectively, we were just wasting money. And I have many statistics that I can use. We were, in 2015, our travel bill was 64 billion naira. Yes. But the amount spent on roads was 19 billion for the whole country, the whole federal government. Now, I was a state commissioner. In 1 year in Ogun State, we spent more than 20 billion on roads, just in our state. How can the whole federation spend 19 billion and we expect to grow? Money was going missing. People were selling oil, diverting the proceeds. So when we talk about who's to blame, it's not about politics, but truth is, if we're to be very honest, it's all of us. Everybody. That's the truth. When it comes to blame, we should always have a mirror. It's all of us. Those of us who heard that money was going missing and did nothing, those who heard money was going missing and didn't believe it, we're all to blame. And the consequences are what we are now dealing with.
Mrs. Adeosun clears the air about government's borrowing.
Yes, Governor Obi mentioned the fact that money was borrowed. We didn't do that loan, but we inherited it, and government is a continuum for the airports that are being fixed now. The runway that was closed in Abuja, we paid Julius Berger up front. We called them, we said, this is your money. Make sure the airport is open on the day it's meant to open. Did it not open? So if you spend money on the right things, you get the right results. I thought it was interesting, just an interesting analogy. We find how much in somebody's flat. Convert it into Naira, it's about 24 billion? 24 billion? It was only 8 billion was needed for that runway. Wouldn't have had to have closed the airport. So we need to be very, very honest with ourselves so that we don't all think it was everybody else, not us. We all sat here, we all watched that excess. There's some countries that just sold their oil forward, like the Mexicans. They sold their oil forward, they said, give us $68 a barrel, we don't care whether it goes to 150, 100, we just want stability. There are some countries where they only spend a fixed percentage of their oil revenues. But we lived on oil, and it made us feel good. And unfortunately, we didn't spend those boom years, we didn't spend the money on the right things. And that's why we are now in a position, as Governor Obi has acknowledged, that we do have to borrow. Why? Because if we have to wait for the oil price to recover, we'll be in recession for a very long time. So the only option we have is borrow, but use the money for capital projects that will grow the economy.
Let's just rise of faith and welcome our dear friend, Professor Yemi Oshibai.
The senior pastor of Covenant Christian Center, Pojo Yemade, ushers in the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, to the podium. The Vice President is confident that with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan recently launched by the federal government, the country is coming out from the doldrums. He sees light at the end of the dark economic tunnel.
I think that it's very clear, and I think everyone agrees, that if there is a single reform that can fundamentally change the narrative of the Nigerian economy, it would be power, providing regular power. And I think that despite all of the issues, one thing that's clear is that we're very focused on ensuring that we're able to provide adequate power. Now, there are many problems, many issues, but we're trying to deal with them as systematically as possible. Let me just explain what the problem is. Many of the companies, many of the private sector companies that invested in the power sector, many of them simply do not have the resources. They don't have the resources to continually invest and continue to, continue to service the equipment, meter, and do other things. That's one part of the problem. Of course, government itself has been remiss in some of the obligations that it owes several of these private sector individuals. But by and large, a major problem has been that the private sector individuals have not been able to invest adequately especially in distribution, metering, so that everybody has a meter and all of those. But then the problem is a little more complicated. They complain that the reason why they don't have enough money is because we don't have what is called a cost-reflective tariff. In other words, they are paying more for producing power than they are being paid by the consumers. Now, that has led to two problems. First is that gas, which of course, as you know, is the main feedstock for all of our thermal stations, and we have more thermal stations than any other type of source of power. Now, gas has to be paid for. So those who are producing the gas now find that they are owed large amounts of money because the generating companies are not able to pay them. Now, the generating companies complain that they are not able to pay because the distribution companies are not collecting enough money. So what the federal government has decided to do as a short-term measure is first to introduce some liquidity into that chain by what is called a payment assurance scheme. The World Bank and the federal government have come together to see how they can make the value chain more liquid in the short term. In other words, ensure that there is payment for gas, so that the gas producers are continually able to supply gas, and that those who are generating can supply to the discos, and of course, the discos can collect what they can, and so the value chain continues to work. Now, that is a facility which is a CBN facility for about 701 billion naira. And this is the first payment, I believe, was made just this month. I believe that's when the first payment was made, this month. Okay. So the first payment has already been made, but we intend to do a reform of that sector. We think that we must do something about the sector as we use this payment assurance guarantee. We must at the same time reform the sector so that the sector is able to attract more investment and attract more capital. But one of the key issues, and nobody likes to talk about it, is that there must be a cost-reflective tariff. Without a cost-reflective tariff, it will be impossible to sustain the power sector going forward.
Professor Osinbajo delves into debts owed by some state governments. He says the central government has been providing support to the states, particularly because of the people. He insists that the fight against corruption will be tougher.
If there's any one issue that has continuously ensured that our country will not make the kind of progress that it should make, is corruption. Because corruption is not just stealing money, and that's a major part of it, but also leads to very bad decisions. Bad policy decisions are made on account of corruption. So somebody decides to build a huge, massive white elephant project, rather than spend money on the things that are important drivers of the economy. So bad decisions are made, bad policies are made, all on account of corruption. So corruption is a major issue and a major issue for our economy. And we have no choice but to deal with it. Thank you very much.